Welcome to the Candid Conversations with MJ Fontaine. This is episode 3 and the 7 Hermetic Principles in Business, part 2. I must get my intro songs back again because I used to have an intro song and I think I'm going to start introducing that back again. But I quite like the ease of just picking up this recording and just recording it. Anyway, so last week, let me look at my notes here. So last week we covered the first 4 principles, the Hermetic principles. If you want to have an introduction into the Hermetic principles, please check the previous episode to this one, because I just want to go into the principles straight off the bat. So last week we covered the first principle, all is mind, the universe is mental. And this covered thoughts are things and what you think you are. And I gave some examples of that in relation to business. The second one is the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. So what's inside is outside, what's outside is inside. Everything is connected, the external and internal. Then I looked at the principle of vibration. Everything moves, everything vibrates, and how controlling our vibration is really important. And then I covered everything is dual, the dualities, light and dark. And how that affects us, the rhythms, affects us in business. And this week, I'm going to cover the last 3 principles, the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, and I think there's a final one, which is the principle of gender. So I've had such brilliant response. Everybody's really enjoying how this relates. So maybe I'll bring another series, a spiritual text, and marry that up with business in March. But March is International Women's Month, so maybe I would cover the goddess and business, or the sacred earth, or something to do with the earthbound spiritual philosophies, maybe. We'll see. Just let me know. Okay, so principle of rhythm, and this relates to everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swings and manifests in everything. The measure of the swing manifests in everything. And sometimes things swing to the left and they swing to the right. And this principle relates to, again, life, death, creation, destruction. And as a creative, you're going to have your life, death moment. And as a woman, because we have a cycle, we have a life, death moment. And that's also to be rebirth. And so reborn. And so this can manifest in our mental state and how we process stuff. It could be, how you lose, you gain a job, you get promoted, and then you might get fed up with that job, and then you go to apply for another job, and you're in a new place. So you're back from the expert, the person on top, to maybe a bit like a novice, because you're having to learn the ropes again. And this could happen when you pivot your business. You could be, working in one industry or area where you're working with one-to-one clients, or you're producing a product that is based on one particular type of client. And then when you pivot your business, you may be serving many, and so it's a new landscape. And so it's knowing that wherever that pendulum swings, it's got to swing back to balance, There's something, I think some people say, oh, it's your season. I believe we have constant seasons, but sometimes in a business, one person may be doing really a lot. Sorry, it's motorbike. Maybe doing a lot and they're revving things up and things are happening in their business. And then when they hit a quiet time, they're thinking, well, things are bad, or I'm not getting as much traction on social media. And so they start using their thoughts, the principle of mentalism, to create a reality of lack, when that is your pendulum swinging back for balance, because this is a universal law. And without the knowledge that things swing back and forth, you're setting yourself up for a fall. And I see this in, I speak as a black woman. I see this a lot in my community. I think because it's left over from slavery, or it's maybe how we experience racism, but we're the hardest taskmasters on ourselves. So, if someone has a business or you're running a business and you've not got sales, the negative self-talk is so strong, because it's like your life depends on this moment, when your life doesn't depend on this moment. It depends on many moments. And so this law that we've left behind, because maybe our parents wasn't able to make mistakes, because the repercussions would be great. And this goes for, again, any person from an immigrant background, or where they come from a place where there may have been persecution, which could be everybody when you think about it. But in terms of race and class and economics, certain people from certain backgrounds would have been affected by this more. So this pendulum swing is not understanding the law and not relaxing into the law. It could be a trauma response or an intergenerational response, that this pendulum has swung so far, but my spring season is not going to come again. And so understanding these laws will really help you know that your time is going to happen. So the pause is the grace period when we are doing things. The pause between projects, or the slow period, is the grace period. Your body and your spirit and your business, or the spirit of your business, is just gathering space, integration, and a moment to go again. And we all need pauses. I haven't picked up my sketchbook, which is quite a long time for me, for a few months. But what I've done is that I've channeled that into my posts, in my creativity, into my home, into my spirituality. I've been journaling, so that's where that's going, is into the journaling. And also my creative visioning in my mind I'm crafting and creating my next reality, co-creating, I would say. But I'm also giving my creativity, that creative energy, which is so precious, I'm giving it space to recuperate and rejuvenate itself, so we can do the next art project or the next creative project. And when I'm working with clients, I'm still using my right brain. I'm still using that creativity. So I'm signaling to it and saying, well, we're still being used. We're just refilling up the reservoir, because I had an amazing autumn with my creativity, and even the whole year by producing all this quite intense, deep work, the weaving stories from my parents, my grandmothers, my paternal bloodline, my maternal bloodline, by me creating these artifacts that can be used. My work has been archived, some of it from my local council. And I think that's really important, because that's where my parents settled. So that is a huge thing. So I'm in this grace period of gratitude and stillness. Although to some people it feels like I'm doing a lot. But I notice my pauses are deeper and slower and softer. And I am more observant of the need not to do so much. So the principle of rhythm is that Lauren Hill puts it, after winter must come spring. and really observing the cycles and really observing the cycles of your business, your work life, your career life, even your romantic relationships. There's going to be an ebb and flow. And if we can follow these principles, maybe people wouldn't be throwing in the towel. It's really, really important. And so that was a fifth principle. The sixth principle is cause and effect. Everything has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to to the law. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So there's many planes. There's an astral plane, there's a mental plane. So there's all planes, the spiritual plane, the emotional plane, where things exist in terms of spirituality. But whatever we do, whatever we put out there, there's an effect of that. So it's really, in terms of your thought process, to be conscious of your thoughts, to prepare, to prepare for the reaction, to prepare instead for the reaction. So create what you desire, to seed what you desire. And that is that's your causation. So that is your mind. Your mind, remember your mind, back to principle 1. Your mind creates your reality. Your mind co-creates your reality. And so with every cause there's effect. And sometimes we think, again, when we're in our law of rhythm, that things are brilliant. Yeah, things are happening so well. I'm going to step on somebody else's toes to get to a better place. Or I'm going to laugh at somebody else or look down on somebody else when I'm doing well. In fact, I only say to people, just bask in your greatness. And if people think that is arrogance, so let it be. But have an open heart and have some compassion. Create your boundaries. However, it's really important that you think about the law of cause and effect, because what you put out there, you will get back. So when when clients come to me and they say, nobody's looking at my Instagram, or, I'm not getting any clients, it's always what's going on in our thoughts. Because most of our best clients, most of our best businesses that we get is when we're not putting in that much work into it. Now, I'm not talking about consistency, because consistency is, to some people, would be hard work, but we need to be consistent. But there's ways that we can make this a joy. And so when we make something a joy, or when it suits our rhythm, it helps us feel better and think better, we can do more of it. So if you're going into social media and you're looking at people and you're getting that comparison demon, then that's the time to get somebody to help you navigate how you can create a better relationship with your social media page for business. I don't think anybody should just be on social media just for the sake of it, unless they're advancing themselves, because eventually the way the algorithms work and everything else, if you've got a negative mindset, you will be affected by this. So what I would say to people is be mindful of your speech. I've seen people, spend their life criticizing others and putting others down. And when you see the effects of how those people are living now, this law isn't, there's always the law of rhythm and the law of cause and effect. Everything you put out there, you will be getting it back. So be mindful of your speech. It's hard. I don't have any money. I've got nothing. Really be kind to yourself and check the thoughts, what you're saying. I'm not talking about making affirmations, but just maybe rephrasing. I very rarely say the word hard. And if I do say the word hard, then I'm in my victim place, or I'm in my child place. I'll say if I'm in relation to a client, if I'm paraphrasing something, or I'm saying, okay, you're saying this is hard, but I try not to say the word hard. I trained myself to say the word challenging because hard had such an energetic effect on me that I didn't like saying it. And so I really think that cause and effect is really important. We think that when people are getting away with something, and I've believed this in my past, they're getting away with what they've done to me. Physically, you can't see what's going on with people. But believe you me, they will suffer the effects of the cause, what they're causing, what they're putting out there. Don't never believe that this law doesn't come into operation in both a good way or a bad way. And also everything has lessons. But this is not to shame people that have been ill, have got an illness or something tragic happened to them. I'm not for once talking about this. I'm just talking in general terms. So with your business, if you're going to put out there or your work that things are not working, then that's what you're going to be faced with. And with the Kabbalion, they always talked about managing your mind. It was always about thought creation. You're gonna create something. And, this was created in a time, where people are still not knowing how the pyramids were built. Think about that one. It's a cause and effect. Things happen. We've got the butterfly effect as well. A butterfly flaps his wings and something else. An earthquake, they say, happens somewhere else. But there's always a cause and effect of what we're thinking. So it's really important not to shame yourself if you are thinking negatively, but to be mindful and, again, curious. Why did I think this thought? That's empowering as opposed to you're thinking it, don't do it. Toxic positivity. We don't want that. And the 7 is the principle of gender. So gender is everything. Everything has masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. So every single thought plane, spiritual plane, gender manifests. Mental, spiritual, physical, all things have generation, creation, and regeneration. So when I think about the principle of gender, and we talk about people being gender fluid and stuff, but I'm talking about this in terms of a spiritual text, and in terms of spirituality. So when we look at the masculine principle, we look at assertiveness, progress, conquesting, explorative. When we look at the feminine, is receptive, sacred, treasured and protective. Again, in business, I use my masculine principle when I'm on a consult, when I'm teaching in a certain way. But when I'm coaching, I can drop into the feminine because I want to hear what the person is saying, and I'm receptive to their spirit. So I'm always listening, not obviously to what you're saying, but I'm listening to what your soul is saying to me, the things you don't say, your gestures, the vibration. I'm feeling your energy. And so I'm tapping into the feminine principle, and then I would engage the masculine principle when I need you to think about something or to explore, what concept you're talking about. I would engage both genders. And this is how we would use in work. Again, so in work, you're explaining something to somebody else. You're saying, we've got to meet these deadlines. So you're engaging your masculine principle energy. But then you're listening to suggestions. So you're being receptive. Somebody's not performing so well. You're helping them. So you're kind of being receptive, and you're nurturing, and you're creating a space. When you're typing a report, your masculine energy will set the time, but your feminine energy will come up with the right words to say. And it doesn't matter what gender you are. And that's the beauty of it, is the fact that you can use that with the principles in your life. And the more women and men and female identified, non-binary use these principles in terms of energy current. So when you've got a positive, negative current, you're looking at a law of gender to create something. you know. So you're going to have an earth and a fire, female and male. In Chinese medicine, we have yin and yang, and we have foods that are yang in nature. So your fiery type foods, and then you've got your earthy foods, and then you've got maybe the water, obviously, and the air foods, but you've got the earth and fire in your foods. And I'm in Ayurvedic medicine, I'm a Pitta, which is a fire energy, and I'm born in July. I'm a Leo, so my natural energy is fire, but I do have some earth in me, but my dominant energy, my dominant element is fire. But then I have a lot of water as well in my chart. And so my intuitive work, I tap into that. And so I know the balance. But there's times when I want a balance, when I'm around a lot of women. I crave the masculine energy because of that law. I want to, to make something, to produce energy, you need friction, you need a spark. And so regardless of what your sexual orientation is, what your gender is, to make something work, you need a spark of those two, masculine and feminine in polarity to create. So I hope that makes sense. I'm not rambling, but it's really, really important that you're able to do this and you're able to honor these elements. And in your business, there will be time where you would be using the masculine energy. Again, even in your advertising, even in your product making, you may need to, like the package, the storage, getting the concept together, and then your fluid feminine energy when you're just creating stuff, you're coming up with a new idea, you need to engage something softer. And therefore, it's using the principles in your life again. Principle of gender, again, your motivation. So again, a really good tip. If you're not motivated, use your feminine principle to find out why. In terms of energy. So if you can't get things together, start asking your question, why is this not happening? What do I need to make me do this work? I always say this to my client, like, what do you need? What do you want? Because that will give you a really good indicator of what you need. You may need to move your body. You may need to do exercise. You may need some help. You may need to sound off with one of your trusted friends. Not dump, sound off. What do you need? And that would really help with the principle in terms of what you're creating. So it's so funny because especially my work now, my work really maintains tradition. And for me, it's what's really important, what's mostly essential in my life. And I feel my community work maintains the tradition in terms of balancing the female and masculine, but it's very, it is very female. When I do my community work, my artwork, I find it's very, very feminine. But then sometimes I'll slip into the masculine when I want to raise questions in my work and I want to tackle some difficult subjects. I engage the courage, not, the courage of, okay, I'm going to speak up through this piece of work, but I'm also going to be assertive. But I tend to tap into the more introverted, feminine principle when I create my artwork. And then when I do my coaching, I have to manage time or sometimes manage a client's thought. So we're getting somewhere. And to give them a bit of structure, I would engage the masculine energy. But it's a creative energy. So I'm always thinking creatively as opposed to, okay, we've got this target. Did you do this? Did you do that? Bang, bang, bang. I can't work like that. And so I engage the masculine energy, but I'm aware of it. And I bring that to the sessions of my awareness of actually, you know what, you need to drop it down an octave, or you need to drop the energy down because this person needs your compassion. And then I can switch back into that. We're human, things can happen. We can be like, okay, I'm going to be hard. It needs to happen sometimes, but it's trusting the rhythm, trusting the law of rhythm to be able to maintain that balance within the sessions or within the creativity, or selecting the right paint, trusting the law of rhythm, in knowing that the law of cause and effect is going to be in operation. If I put this particular thing here, then it's going to create this outcome. So really being intentional with the questions I ask or the paint I put on the canvas. Really being intentional with that. Looking at, the duality, the vibration, what's going to happen with, this person's going to be happy one day that I have a session with, and the next day she may not come to the coaching session happy, and that's okay. And that's okay for me to hold that space, because everything has its poles, and personal development and positivity doesn't last all the time. We have to go to the other pole to bring up stuff to the shadow, and vibration. What am I feeling in my body in this particular session, of this particular artwork? How is it going to make people feel? Do I care with the artwork? Do I just need to get it out to represent something I'm going through? Or am I trying to create a dialogue that is going to change everybody's perceptions about themselves? The vibration of working with somebody, okay, their vibration's low. We need to engage their wise intelligence so that they can bring their self up. What is a vibration I'm feeling? It's constantly a check-in. And knowing that my thoughts create my results. My thoughts create my emotions. That also create the actions I take. That also create the result. And this is why I love the work of Brooke Castile, the model which I use, because it really relates and connects with the Kabbalion and the Hermetic principles, and to me, they're the foundation of everything. And so, we've come to the end. I hope this has been really informative, helpful, inspiring. I went down the rabbit hole, and I hope you can use this and tie it in with your business. And let's continue the dialogue. Let me know how it's impacted you. Put comments down in the SoundCloud, or if you're listening to this on iTunes, just send me a comment on the Instagram page, and just let me know how you felt this 2-part series worked, because to me it was so nice revisiting these principles. And so if this work resonates with you, I want to invite you to schedule a discovery call with me, to see how I can help you with your creative business, how to manage this business or project that you have, so you can manage your mind using some of these principles, so you can create the work that you were born to do. And you can contact me on www.mjfontaine.co.uk, or hit me up on Instagram, mjfontaine. My art page is MJ Fontaine Art. This is Marilyn Fontaine signing off. Till next week, have a wonderful, wonderful week.